Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order. Before I go to disclosure of pecuniary interest, I'm going to just turn the meeting over for a moment to Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a couple items. This is kind of, I guess we call a point of privilege at this point. I just wanted to let council, some of council know and some key staff know. I've been diagnosed with leukemia. Excuse me. And that's fine, George, thanks. I've been actively pursuing treatment for the last month and a half, thereabouts. It became clear that yesterday I spent most of my day in the RVH Emerge department, that I'm sicker than I thought. My chemo is, excuse me, my chemo is going to be starting in a week or so, which will affect my attendance, obviously. My immune system will be somewhat compromised, so for those who are hoping I might show up at a Christmas party or ribbon cutting, that ain't gonna happen. The long-term prognosis is excellent. The short-term prognosis is for the next month or two is gonna be a little tough. I've talked to the mayor about this for coverage for meetings, and I just wanted to let people know today I'm supposed to be getting a text any minute or sometime today during this meeting for an appointment in Barrie, so I will be leaving if that comes during the course of the meeting. Otherwise, I'll continue on. I would ask that this remain, I realize it's a public statement I'm making, but my health is a private matter. Excuse me 1 second. It's difficult on family, so I would request that it not be speculated anywhere. If you have a question, you can text me. If you want to get in contact me directly, I would ask you actually leave a message through the office here. This morning I got 2 calls from Microsoft Security and 1 from Revenue Canada on my phone. I don't really need to be disturbed by anyone other than them. I can enjoy those calls. So I apologize for taking the time for this. It will be business as usual, and unless my health team or my body tells me I can't be here. Okay, so thank you for your time.
Well, before we move on, I'll just pass on my concern and that you'll be in our thoughts and prayers, and at any point if you want to be put on a powerful prayer list when it's a little more public, let me know.
Thank you.
If anyone has pecuniary interest at this time or during the course of the meeting, you can let me know.
I do. I haven't written it up on the item to do with the after-hours clinic because of my involvement with the community health center. I'll be stepping away from that conversation, and if someone will give me a form, I'll write it up.
And I also have one from Mayor Fulci related to public work accounts, check number 24661 as it pertains to a family member. At this time, I'd like to call Mr. Edwards and Mr. Mahadi to the table to do a deputation related to youth strategy. So I'll start this now here. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here today to share the work that we've done with the town on the development of the youth strategy. We're going to present to you some high-level kind of results from the strategy and give you a sense of the context, and then any questions that you have, please feel free to let us know. So we started this process just 2 years ago, focused on engaging young people to help develop the strategy, and also members of the community and adult allies. There were different representatives from across the community who provided their input. We did a focus group, we collected surveys from young people, and we grounded the findings in evidence as well. So we looked at the province of Ontario's Stepping Up framework, which is focused on looking at the outcomes, the changes that we're hoping to see in young people over the next 20 years. We looked at the Youth Who Thrive literature review that our organization, the Students' Commission of Canada, published in 2017, which looks at the critical factors that support young people to thrive. And we looked at a number of different other sources as well from Parks and Recreation Ontario to really kind of pull together a strategy and a document that will hopefully serve your community well. One of the things, just to ground this, is our organization is a national charity focused on youth engagement. We've developed youth strategies for a number of different communities, and so we've brought those recommendations from those other communities into this conversation as well, to kind of make sure that you're having a holistic kind of viewpoint. So not only did we listen to the voices of young people and adult allies in this community, but we also brought forward the experience and expertise that we've gathered from young people and adult allies from coast to coast to coast. So we have a slide deck, and there's a number of different slides, and so we'll just give you a high-level kind of overview of the strategy. I'll talk about some of the strategic priorities that we are recommending, and then Garth will speak to some specific action items that are underneath each of these strategic priorities. We won't go through all of the action items, they're in the 32-page report, but we'll share some of the high-level ones that we think are relevant for you to know about. So the first strategic priority is really geared around building a sense of community among youth in Wasaga Beach. So, and ensuring, one thing I'd like to just emphasize about this point that we see in the evidence, but we also see from young people's voice directly, is the importance of building not just a community for youth, but an intergenerational partnership of youth, adult allies, and seniors. And so that's just a message that we'd like to kind of leave with you, is that the community that young people are looking for is not just for themselves, it's actually to be connected to those who are older than them. The second kind of key strategic priority is to develop programs and services to address current gaps identified by the working group of youth and adult allies. So young people had a lot to say, and also their adult allies had a lot to say about programs and services that they thought would benefit not only themselves, but also the community at large. And then one of the things, the third priority that came forward, is to improve accessibility to services and information. And this is a kind of paradoxical priority, because we're in an age of so much information, but the bombardment of information is actually quite overwhelming for this generation. And so it's difficult to know how to navigate the information and to know exactly how to get those messages transmitted about services that may exist directly to young people. So we're going to move now into some specific action items underneath each of these priorities, and then we'll hopefully take some questions if we don't run over our time. Oh, just use the mouse.
Arrows too. So yes, as Shariva said, so you see on your left, you'll have the strategic priority, which each of the recommendations is related to, and then on the right we have the action items that we're hoping to see happen to help reach the goals and work towards the strategic priorities that have been found in the report. So the first recommendation, we're hoping to continue to develop relationships with community stakeholders, youth, and the working group. So this includes developing social and cultural-based programs, fully implement sport and recreation, cultural gay trade alliance, and environmental subcommittees of the Youth Advisory Council, as well as partner with existing youth and recreation-focused organizations to offer programs. The second recommendation for this priority is to create meaningful opportunities for youth, adults, and teenagers to work together in partnership. So this can be developing a mutual mentorship program. So like we had said, the youth working group was a mix of youth and adults. And we know that with the Active Living Center, Active Senior Center, I believe, that's newly being opened, there are more opportunities to have intergenerational programming. Provide more inclusive and accessible tutoring opportunities for youth, as well as provide job shadowing opportunities for youth. The third recommendation for the priority was to prepare Wasaga Beach youth to be successful in school extracurricular programs. So this involves building out relevant programs that assist Wasaga Beach youth in being successful in attending school extracurricular activities. Ensure recreation facilities and play spaces are designed to teach relevant skills and associated with organized play, recreation, and sport, as well as develop social and cultural-based programs. So now this is the first recommendation for the second priority. Now this is hoping to provide new programs and services where needed and further develop unstructured play spaces across Wasaga Beach. In the report you will find what the youth working group has identified as some gaps as well as strengths in Wasaga Beach that are revolving around some resources and programs that they're hoping to see, and ones that are also very good for them in terms of reaching the outcomes that we're hoping to see in the future. So continue to enhance outdoor spaces that promote sports and unstructured play, such as skateboard parks and basketball courts, as well as create a youth committee supported by adults and key organizations to undertake the project. Second is to enhance current programs and build or implement a variety of youth recreation and leisure opportunities while striving to further engage the youth of Wasaga Beach. So here we're hoping to seek funding to provide more accessible programming activities. So one thing that was talked about was actually having free rental equipment in some of the community centers, develop more socially inclusive programming for youth, as well as develop infrastructure to support recreation center projects, both indoor and outdoor spaces for the future. The third recommendation is to advocate for relevant and beneficial support services for Wasaga Beach youth. So we were hoping to work with youth serving organizations such as the YMCA, Public Library and Health Center to discuss implementation of new needs-based programs, build on and advertise the Good Food Box and other food programs, as well as offer connections to emergency crisis and support systems, and provide support services to LGBTQ youth. And the third strategic priority and the recommendations are to create a communication network utilizing existing social media platforms to promote and enhance visibility of Wasaga Beach support services, jobs, programs, and volunteer opportunities relevant to youth. This one really came up when during the youth working group meetings, often some of the youth didn't know of all those services that existed and said that they were gaps, but then the adults actually knew that they were, so there's clearly just misinformation that the youth aren't getting, so know about what the services are in Wasaga Beach. So we're hoping to develop opportunities for organizations to share best practices surrounding services for youth as well. Implement youth-focused bulletin board system across town in popular youth hangouts. So this could also be in schools, community center. Work with cadets, YMCA, the library, sports organizations, and other municipalities or youth centers to identify strengths that other groups can share and learn from each other. Cadets was a really big program that was mentioned multiple times in the working group meetings that had, but just the way that they functioned, made youth feel very equal, and that was something that they really valued. Work with organizations in the community to identify a common platform and methods to share information. So also increase collaboration and communication among organizations focused on serving youth in Wasaga Beach. So convene meetings of organizations to review and explore ways to collaborate and implement the strategy, promote shared use of the communication network, and encourage and support collaborative programming and services, including shared revenue generation and transportation options. And the last recommendation is to advocate for the creation of flexible transportation options for youth. We know that because many of the youth are traveling outside of Wasaga Beach to go to school, this is somewhat of an issue for them, trying to do extracurricular activities if they don't have a ride home, for example, or having to pay for their bus fare. So we're hoping that we can work with the school board to identify possibility of more flexible bus system, seek funding to provide shuttle bus services for youth after-school programs, continue to provide youth bus pass subsidy, and work to promote feasible transportation options for youth in and out of town. Advocate for active transportation options relevant to youth in Wasaga Beach as well.
So those are the recommendations and the action items that fit under each of the recommendations, and so we're, I think, open for questions or comments.
Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a question or comment, because this is excellent, but for the public, because we're a community where the last census, I believe, the average age of a resident is about 6 years higher than the provincial average. But from our 0 to 19 age group, we were one of the fastest growing communities. So this is important. We've talked a lot about, retaining youth because they are the future of your community, and so it's very comprehensive, and it's a daunting challenge to implement all this, but I think we need to get started, so thanks. Yeah, I'll go back. I was so enthralled. Yes.
Thanks,
Councillor
Mr.
Kennedy.
Chair, to our presenters. First of all, I want to thank you so much for driving up from Toronto. The weather hasn't been the greatest, but you delivered a very interesting but impactful presentation today. And I think we're stepping in the right direction. But I truly think with this document, we still have to listen to our youth, because they're changing and the document is also changing. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when reading the report the other day, I noticed a couple things that you highlighted here, and I think they're important to remember. And we created the Senior Active Learning Center in the same space as the Youth Center, and they work at different timing, but you talked about the value of finding ways for, whether it's mentorship or group stuff, for the mutual benefit of both parties. So you've got a vast amount of experience and a vast amount of energy. You can figure out which is which. And by having them coordinated in the same spot, I think there's, and I know our staff are working on those kind of things, but I think there's a great synergy to be had here. So I thought that was important to remind. And then the other part, and probably it's in your last slide right there, is the idea. Most of us have had children who've gone to school in not our town, gone to high school in associated towns, and we understand as parents here, we understand the limitations that are caused by transportation. The bus comes at a certain time and it leaves at a certain time. And for those whose children may be in some kind of extracurricular, for the longest time it required driving constantly, one way or the other, heading of 3 directions. We instituted a bus system locally, which is kind of integrated, which works, but I do think, the more realistic approach in the short term is to look at advocating for the school board to work on transportation. We all want a high school, we get that, but that, in the best case scenario, that's several years out if they started tomorrow. Whereas bus routes can be dealt with somewhat quicker, or alternates can be explored much more quickly. So thank you for your report. It was very good.
Mayor Byfuglien.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I can tell you're passionate about it. Love your energy. I'm actually looking more to staff just to see, so there's 9 key recommendations, and can we expect to see those through 2020 start to roll out in different areas?
Absolutely. I think we've already started working on a few of these action items that were suggested, and I think through some further engagement with the youth, we're actually looking at a municipally joint youth survey right now that has the strategic plan first and foremost in mind, to find out where we can start looking at sustainable program options to meet some of the criteria outlined in the presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Is there any other comments? Okay, well, first of all, I apologize for speaking first. I totally forgot I was chair. But I also would just like to point out that within our community, our food banks service more than 400 youth. And so certainly, when we talk about subsidies and the need to look after that, there's quite a bit of work to do. And that just scratches the surface of food insecurity within the community. So we know there's probably 1,000 youth that when it comes to the cost of transportation and those kind of things, that there needs to be assistance. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very comprehensive. And
Thank you.
so moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by myself. Can I do that as chair? Oh, okay. Okay. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that the Town of Wasaga Beach adopts a youth strategy prepared by the Students' Commission of Canada, and further that staff are directed to work through the 9 key recommendations and continue to enhance youth services for Wasaga Beach. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now move to, there's no unfinished business, so we'll move to other agency reports. And morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Always a pleasure to see you. And
Well,
you're up.
thank you. What are you after?
Budget time.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't go the other way.
I bought a Christmas tree that's looking pretty
Oh, I see,
good.
that's what it is, so just ignore that. So, thank you. So, in the month of October, we responded to 142 calls for service. You'll note, though, there was a lot of calls for alarm activations and carbon monoxide calls. So that was a spillover from the hydro surge. So for weeks after, we were still responding to those areas that had that surge and dealing with alarms that were activating when they shouldn't be or weren't working. So the number 142 is quite high for October, but that's the reason for that. Our most notable incident just occurred last Friday. It was outside of town. It was a mutual aid to Clearview. They had a large barn fire. I think everybody's heard about that. Challenging with barns. I mean, they're dry, they're old, they go up pretty quick, and barns are usually outside of a hydrant area. So that was the mutual aid request, was for, actually we ended up using our pumper, and Clearview and Spring Water were shuttling water to the scene. So it's a matter of controlling the burn, really is what it is, and protecting the exposures. So it was a situation that was handled very well, and again, we're always happy to help our neighbors in those circumstances. October was busy with fire prevention, public education activities, as Fire Prevention Week did fall in October, so we were at a number of events and attended all the schools and did our fire drills as usual. Today should be the final day for our new self-contained breathing apparatus project. We've replaced all the breathing apparatus under this year's budget, and hopefully today, could spill into tomorrow, we'll have all those new packs in place. So we're the first ones in Ontario to go to this level. We just hit it at the right time where we're at the highest standard, and we're the first ones in the province going to have these in place. So yeah, it's exciting. And the only other thing I was going to mention was at the end of this month, we're doing our first aid and CPR training for all the town staff that are willing to take that training. And it's a 3-year certification for first aid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any comments or questions? Thank you, Chief. Okay, we'll now move to the consent agenda, and I believe there's only been one item pulled, and that was the Recreation Events and Facilities Report, so we'll do the consent. That's 3.5.1. So moved by Councillor Watson and seconded by Councillor Wells, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee hereby received the November 14th, 2019 consent agenda items 3.4 through to 3.7, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion to be voted on separately.
Did you do the fire department motion?
Oh, sorry, I don't.
It doesn't matter, it's
Oh.
just,
Did I miss it? Okay, thank you, everybody. Fulci, I'll do that one. I won't reread the other one, I think we got that one. But resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the November 2019 Fire Department report for information. That was moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kenny. I think we have to have a new mover.
yes.
Do we have a mover? Okay, Councillor Foster. And all those in favor? Carried unanimously.
We didn't have to vote on this one.
No, okay, yes. And so we will now vote on the consent agenda. All in favor?
Is there anything
Was there
posted?
any poll?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
read
Yeah,
that before.
he
You
did.
want me to
Yeah.
do it
We
again?
pulled 351.
Yeah, special events.
Special events was pulled.
Okay.
Yeah, just the one item was pulled. That was recreation and events. We okay to vote? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, I pulled if, Chris, maybe if you could come up. I could have commented, but there were two very significant and positive items in your report that, I thought would be best if you talk to them publicly. And one was the grade 8 swimming program and the testimonial. I think that would be very good for the public to hear. And the second one was related to the successful awarding for the Senior Active Living Center funding, which was significant. So.
Okay, well, I can address the Seniors Active Living Center. This is, as we all probably understand, an annual grant in perpetuity. We were awarded the same amount, and on top of that, a capital special investment. We put some money into the garage renovation last year, and this year the money was applied for having automatic door buttons. So we're going to install those on 2, maybe 3 if we can afford it. There's a $66,000 additional grant from the Seniors Active Living Center provincial program. On to the second item. I think that Josh can speak better to it. He has been on the ground organizing, and obviously if you hadn't seen on page 3 of my report, I think it's page 74, there is a small testimonial there that came from staff at the YMCA, I think originally, and Josh is aware of the numbers, et cetera, in this program.
Absolutely. So this program started last year. I think we were in pretty heavy discussion about waterfront safety, and this was sort of a public education piece that was brought forward. It's been extremely successful, as you can see by the testimonial provided from one of the kids through the staff at the YMCA. I think the program is very impactful. The grade 8s are a grade and sort of at the age where they start to experience our waterfront by themselves. They're either down there supervising maybe some smaller siblings, or venturing down there with their friends. So I think it is important to make sure that they know what they're doing in emergency situations, and that's what this class addresses specifically. So as part of the curriculum, they are basically pushed into the pool fully clothed, so they know what that feels like. In case they are out in the bay in a situation like that, they are less panicky because they've kind of been through that situation. There's also a first aid component, CPR component to it, so they go through some basics on if they do need to respond to an emergency situation. Moving forward, this is only 2 schools that we've had out so far, so we're probably looking at another 40 or 50 kids who will participate in this program this year. So we're reaching about 140, 150 grade 8 students annually by providing these programs.
Okay, thank you. Just for the public, the actual testimonial, there were some youth that were very tentative, if not having a healthy fear of water. And in one case, the youth, after going through the program, is actually pursuing to become a part of the junior lifeguard program. So, you know, that's a very significant change for young people. So anyhow, just excellent, and I thought that was good to bring forward. So thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wells.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, on another note, from the same report, and I have spoken to Chris about it, but I was a little disappointed seeing, and I know that there's no good time to do this, let me say that up front. I was a little disappointed to see the time frame that was going to be involved in the retiling of the pool and the why. That's up to them, it's their project, but December 8th to December 30th takes out the entire Christmas break, and I think it's unfortunate that families who are going to be on holidays from school during that period of time obviously are not going to be able to access or use that time to use the Y pool as an activity during their Christmas break. So I know there's not a good time, and I know that to do it at any other time of the year probably involves affecting swimming classes, scheduled classes. But I would have been much happier to see at least one of those weeks, particularly maybe the second week, the Boxing Week, to New Year's, having that facility available for families to use it. So it's unfortunate that they've chosen, in my mind, to do it at that time. Anyway, just my comment.
Go ahead, Chris.
I have been working with the YMCA staff, and Councillor Wells is correct that they're starting as soon as possible once the swimming lessons. 800 kids are currently registered in swimming lessons, so that winds down at the first week of December. And just to clarify, the work that's involved is first to drain the pool, second is to do this epoxy grout process that requires curing time, so they can't put the water immediately back in, and then to refill the pool. And a second point only of clarification that this December 30th is a Sunday, and that second week of Christmas break will be somewhat available. Obviously there's some interruption with the New Year's Eve day is a half day at the pool, and New Year's Day, though the Y is open, they limit their hours on stats, but there will be I guess 5-ish days of the second week if they stick to this schedule. And last but not least, in further follow-up, they've assured me if they can finish early, they will open. So they'll do their darndest to try and move the process along. But it is sometimes complicated with reheating the pool and priming all of the pumps, etc. I think it's literally 2 days of just water filling. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further? Okay, so moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by myself. Resolved that the Community Service Section Coordinating Committee does hereby receive the Recreation Events and Facilities Department Report, Monthly Activity Report for information. All in favor? Carried unanimously. So we will now take I think that's it. Now we'll change secretaries, so a 10-minute break, George?
6 minutes till 10 after.
Okay, we'll be back at 10 after.
good. We're back. I think we're live. All right. Thank you everyone for coming back and joining us at the Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee. We'll start. We have two separate presentations today. The first one is Mr. Steve Langlois. We'll discuss the Parks and Trail Master Plan and provide status updates. So Kevin, do you need anything more in the way of an introduction?
I don't think so. I think I don't want to take too much of Steve's thunder here. So this is obviously the first presentation to committee on the Parks and Trails Master Plan. So Steve will provide an overview of the program as well as some of the feedback we've received to date from some of the committee consultation process.
Okay, and I'm going to go sit over there. So if I forget, will someone remind me I'm chairing this section?
Don't look for me to remember.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Pleased to be here this morning. As Kevin mentioned, this is our first opportunity to formally introduce the project, so I'll be doing that in the next few minutes. Also want to give you a bit of a sneak peek on what we're hearing from the consultation program to date, let you know about next steps, and then solicit any additional input that you may wish to provide at this stage of the game. I will mention with Monteith Brown Planning Consultants, we're also leading a team of consultants in this project, so you might see a few others as we go through, but we have several disciplines on board to assist you through the process. In terms of our sort of project statement, we know that the town is committed to ensuring that Parks and Trail system is meeting resident and visitor needs, with parks operations being transferred over to Public Works a couple years ago. It's a good opportunity now to take a closer look at what we need moving forward. So that's where this Parks and Trails Master Plan fits in. It's intended to set priorities for improving and expanding those places and spaces for the next 10 years. Our scope is pretty detailed. We're going to be looking at really all things parks and trails, from needs assessments. Do we have enough parkland in the right areas? Are there gaps that need to be addressed? What improvements can we make to existing parks, as well to meet emerging and ongoing needs? Parkland policy, so working with your planning departments to make sure that they have the tools necessary to activate the plan itself. Playgrounds are also an item that have been referred into this plan. They need to be replaced generally every 20 years. Every community struggles with that, and that's something that's, again, we're taking a closer look at and identifying priorities for replacement or improvement. Similarly for trails, connections, beach access trails, park and trail maintenance, and signage and wayfinding. And we recognize that a lot of properties, not everything that's a park and trail is yours in this community. Certainly you have Ontario Parks have a large role to play, so we're working them into the process as well, learning from them and hopefully working hand in hand through implementation. That's something that Public Works has done very well over the course of the last few years. In terms of our process, we got started late summer, so we're still in that first phase of work. We're getting through most of the public and stakeholder engagement. The first phase is complete. I'll speak to that in a moment, but we're really going to be going away and starting to craft the plan over the next number of months and coming back in front of this committee with those draft plans and seeking approval into the new year. It will probably be springtime when we're looking to wrap this up. Just to give you a little bit more insight into how we approach these processes, certainly public and stakeholder input is a key piece to the puzzle, but it's not the only building block. I think, as you heard in your previous presentation, demographics growth, that's an important thing for us to understand because it impacts how your facilities and services are used and how they might be changed over the course of time, trends, usage data, policies, guidelines, inventories, and distribution of amenities is also key to that analysis. So that's where we are at this stage of the game. Quick overview of our consultation program to date. Everything's been made available through the project website on the Let's Talk WasagaBeach.ca. We've had over 600 clicks. That was as of almost 3 weeks ago, probably. So that will continue to grow over the course of the process. Email feedback. My email's been put out there as has Kevin, so we're soliciting input that way. If individuals didn't make it out to a public event, they can provide input through that means. I'll present in a moment a couple slides on the community survey. We had nearly 200 completed responses to that very detailed survey, so that will be helpful for us. We circulated a survey to all town staff and council, members of mayor, members of council as well, so I know many of you would have provided some input through that process. That was very helpful, so thank you for that. 3 weeks ago, we were here to undertake 2 public open houses. We had over 80 people out to those. And then just last week, we hosted a number of stakeholder focus groups as well. So we're trying to, we were trying to do it before the weather turned and we were close. But in any event, we're casting the net wide, but your message to constituents, if they're still interested, there's always an opportunity to provide input through email, through the website at this moment in time. Just quickly, we'll touch on everything. I think everyone has this in their package, but wanted to point out your parks and trails are heavily used, and the box on the left, this could be any park or any trail. It's not just yours, those operated by Ontario Parks, but more than half of those that responded to the survey are using your parks on a weekly basis or more. And nearly 70% are using your trails on a weekly basis or more. So these are definite quality of life amenities that help to define your community and indicate what folks are looking to do with their leisure time. Top 5 priorities for investment. You'll start seeing some themes as we go through this, but natural trails are certainly seen as an asset, and always continue to make sure that we invest in those as appropriate. Comfort amenities, park washrooms, you'll see seating, benches, that comes up quite a bit. Beach access points, playgrounds. So I'm gonna, because I think it's a bit iterative as I go through this, I'll touch on a few different highlights that are coming out of the beach phase of our consultation. Just on the left here, ability to participate. So this is the barrier question. We're actually encouraged by these results. A quarter or in and around a quarter of your residents are not able to participate as often as they would like. I mean, certainly we'd love that to be 0%, but in the grand scheme of things, we know that there are some barriers. At the same time, we're encouraged by the fact that the majority of your residents are able to spend their leisure time the way that they're hoping for. Key barriers, lack of time, too busy, that's a hard one for us to grapple with. Certainly I think promotion is a big part of that, and as people make this part of their daily routines, that's very helpful. Park is too far away. We hear about what are the themes, and we can look at it very simply on a park map. Not a lot of opportunities in the eastern and western ends of your community, so we would have had responses in that regard. And then lack of supporting amenities. As we try to design parks and trails for use by all ages, all abilities, you begin to realize, do we have enough of those benches, those seatings, those parking, accessible parking areas, shade are all a big part of what gets people to parks and trails and keeps them in them. Just quickly, I mentioned the council and staff survey. Use by all, certainly that's been a key theme. We know about your demographics, and we also know that you're a growing community, so there's demand from a wide range of age cohorts. Making things as multifunctional as possible, probably more relevant for parks in particular. Signage and wayfinding, that has been an item that's been raised at several of our meetings, even with stakeholders, recognizing that many longtime residents that don't even know where certain things are. And signage and promotion and marketing can help to assist that, and particularly with tourists and newcomers to your community. It's a great opportunity there. Public open house, I think we've covered many of these points. A couple of them that have also been raised, we've been talking about amenities within parks, and some of these crossover with recreation a bit. You do have one outside here and one up at the arena, some outdoor fitness equipment. With your aging population, looking for more opportunities for that, as well as to program it, to promote it, to explain how to use the equipment, and even to maybe have some sessions and courses around that to make sure folks are comfortable using it. And I think I mentioned the safety and comfort amenities, washroom, seating, shade, that's been a common theme as well. Lastly, before I wrap up, mentioned we've had, last week we held a number of stakeholder group sessions, probably reaching out to around 20 different organizations, including some of them in your internal departments. structured around health, age, accessibility, youth, tourism, events, recreation, trails, environment, because we know the scope of the work that we're doing is quite broad. We have yet to sit down, but we will be coordinating some sessions with Ontario Parks, and really just been discussing together different opportunities to work together, because we know it takes a village when it comes to these types of services. So just if you're interested where we are in the process, we're essentially closing out phase 1, which has been our research and consultation phase. We're transitioning into creating the plan, which will involve a lot of the items I mentioned off the top: park policy, needs assessments, trails and wayfinding reviews, as well as more of a maintenance and operations type of review. So I'll just leave this up, and I'll use this really as an opportunity to open the floor to any questions that you might have about the process or what we've heard to date. I would also encourage, if you're so inclined, to provide any input that might be input or direction that might be helpful for us, really in terms of what you're doing well. So things that we're doing well, let's not change it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Anything that we can improve relative to our key focus areas, critical priorities, and just best advice as we go through developing this master plan for your community.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. With that being said, I'll open it up if anyone has any questions or comments. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Steve and Kevin. I mean, I'm very, very happy that we're looking at parks and trails, because from a health point of view, I don't think that anything more important for a community than to be healthy, and this is an excellent way of doing it. And if we can get a brainstorm around the needs of our residents and better understand them, then we can better enhance that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was very pleased to see the east and west portions of the town identified. I think that's critical that we build up those resources out there. I think part of the problem, especially in the far east end, has been the seasonality of our residents out there, typically over the years, but that's changing. People are retiring to their, would have been maybe a cottage before, or four-season home, and I think we own some lands in those areas, and the sooner we can address those and get some amenities out in both ends, I think would be very helpful. Having a little bit of experience in the city a few years ago, I'm looking at, you're mentioning amenities such as benches and that sort of thing. Toronto is famous for the amount of parks that they have everywhere. They have green space, and what I'm seeing there are concrete and or stone benches, amenities that are there for the long term. I'm sure they're expensive, but I've even seen in one particular park that I used to walk through a ping pong table made out of, I had a picture of it one time, I don't have it anymore, but it was concrete or stone ping pong table that was there. Those things will last. They're, you can't really haul them away too easily. So, those types of things, maybe something we could look at, so that once they're in place, they are there. And I was also happy to hear about the getting the talks going with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests, because they're our largest landowner, biggest green space in town. And I think they have to be to the table to help promote this and complement our efforts throughout the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you for the presentation. It's great to see that we're doing this. I think it's very proactive. Flipping through the headlines today, there was the City of Winnipeg looking at a $97 million shortfall to upgrade or update their the parks throughout their town. So I guess because they fell behind in their maintenance, suddenly they're looking at this absolutely huge bill. So I think things like this help us keep on top, and we are growing, but I think it's really important to continue to invest in parks and trails.
Thank you very much. Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one thing I didn't see is, looking at best practices within the provincial park system, whether it be Ontario or other. Like I've had the opportunity to be like the reserve of Montebello, where they have horse-drawn sleigh rides, and they do programming that makes the utilization park and the vibrancy of the park significant. There was a park that was doing chili and chocolate events, you know, where you would snowshoe and have stops along the way. And I spend a lot of time in the provincial park. I'm more on the kind of the Marlwood side where I enter, and I would suggest that it's grossly underutilized given what a fantastic spot it is. And so I think there's just huge opportunity from a tourism aspect and from a health aspect to engage people and, you know, again, offer more. So, but as I said, there's a lot of parks around the country that they've already initiated programs that maybe should be looked at and say, is there an opportunity to do it here in Wasaga Beach?
Okay, thank you, and I'll make a comment if I can, and again, I do believe that this is there's a priority for ongoing and rapid growth for the overall health of the community and the individuals who both live and visit here through both sections, the park and the trail piece. In the past, we've made some great strides, and I'd like to see that continued. I had two questions perhaps for the proponent there, or the delegate. One is, somewhere in your report you talk about 600 aware participants. What is an aware participant?
Aware participant is an individual that has clicked onto our project webpage, so they've had an opportunity to learn about the project. They didn't advance to, 200 of those would have completed the survey, and the balance hadn't, but that was a poll. We pulled that data through your staff in mid-October, so we anticipate that number will continue to grow.
Okay, so that then leads me to the next section, because again, people know I love my math. So statistical significance of 195 responses in a population of, what did you say the number was, 17,000, 20,000, whatever it is, is that statistically significant, that response?
We treat surveys as one piece of the puzzle, so
Okay.
In terms of looking at all the other consultation that we've done, it's not the only piece of input. That said, with moving to sort of a system of online surveys, which is just how things work these days, they become non-randomized, so they're really not statistically significant. So that term gets a bit overused nowadays. So is it indicative of your entire population? No, maybe not. But what we take away from it is the ranking and the different priorities that people place on the investments and items that they're looking for. So we do treat it as one input into the whole process that we balance against all the input we get, both internally through council, through staff, through the stakeholders, as well as the external open houses.
Yeah. And I guess maybe I'm old school on that, but I always feel more information is important, and I know we're talking about bang the table and all that, our system that we use, but I do see when we had things, whether it's this or whether it's the arena or whether it's any other project in town, the more feedback we have through multiple methods, like one is a survey, one is your open houses and your everything else. But I do think it's absolutely critical that we beg or demand or whatever we can do to get the more information, to really judge what the flow is. So if there's nothing else on that, I will thank you for the presentation. I've got a resolution here. It's moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Belanger. Resolved, the Public Works section of the Coordinating Committee received the information presented by Mr. Langlois for information. I'll ask all those in favor. That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. I should also have mentioned at the beginning, if anyone has a conflict of interest, feel free to jump up at any time on that. We're doing a double header today. There's another presentation. This is from Michael Culp of CC Tatham Engineering, and it's got to do with the Main Street Class EA Kevin, do we need anything more in the way of introduction, or are you gonna?
I don't think so, Mr. Chair, just certainly tough shoes to fill, Michael, good luck with that. But we have, this, I guess, along the same lines, this is just an update as it relates to the municipal Class EA for, you know, the streetscaping and the improvements for Main Street as well as beach areas 1 and 2, and certainly this component is critical in advance of any consideration for streetscaping improvements through there. It also feeds into the longer plan for some of these streets, particularly, and it's on the agenda today as well, is Beach Drive and what that design may, you know, what this plan may direct that design towards. So this particular presentation, I think, is mainly for some of the transportation assessment needs and certainly next steps and where we go from here. We haven't had our public meeting yet for this EA. This is a Schedule C Class EA, and we'll have 2 public open houses or public information centers. And Michael will speak to that through his presentation. So this is really just an update and next steps.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll maybe ask that we can get the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
So you could redo the Parks one, it went really well.
Work off of this.
Very perfect.
Just like that. Thank you, James.
Stuff we're talking. Perfect. Excellent. Mine on as well have it. So thank you again. I'm Michael Cullet from Tatham Engineering, and we've been tasked with proceeding through and completing this study on behalf of the town. So some of the things that I wanted to speak to today is just basically the understanding as to why this project is happening and what the motivation is for it, what our work program will be going through the process, what the deliverables will be, and then further from today's presentation, what our immediate next steps are. So certainly in context of the work that's being done through this council and through previous councils over the past year, there's definitely a vision and a goal to recreate the Main Street into more of a downtown form and function, and to extend that onto Old Moseley and even into the Beach Drive area between beaches 1 and 2, recognizing that the town has a significant attraction there that can only serve both future and current needs, and then looking into the future as to how can we make that attraction even more popular and beneficial to its communities. And in doing so, there's a realization that the paradigm in transportation has shifted from, which was once an auto-centric age, where years back I was speaking to an older gentleman who lives in Wasaga, and he remembers that, you know, cars were piled 3 deep on the beach itself, and then we've got the 2-lane road. Whereas today, and the previous presentation speaks to this, is now we're speaking more and considering more the needs of pedestrians, and the needs of cyclists, the needs of the recreational aspects of our community. So that certainly has to be considered as we move forward through this, albeit a transportation project. And at the end of the day, the puzzle here is to really, how do we take those various pieces, how do we take those various needs and assemble them in a fashion that will serve all those people that we want to be able to get through the Main Street, through the Moseley Street and onto the beaches, and make sure that this project is in fact a very successful one. And when we look at the work that has been done, that's going to inform our study. We are going to rely heavily on the urban design guidelines and the downtown development master plan that was recently completed, and then looking at the official plan amendments, the transportation master plans, and the active transportation plan. We are not taking the results or recommendations of any of these as given. The objective of our approach is to identify what possible solutions are, recognizing what has been recommended, what has been developed through other studies, and then through the evaluation process, try to establish and identify which of those is most appropriate in context of the various environments in which we are going to be considering. So as Kevin mentioned, this is a Schedule C class environmental assessment, so there are set guidelines and frameworks with respect to how the study must be completed, to ensure that there is appropriate public consultation through the way, to ensure that appropriate consideration is given to the environments in which we are working. So there's effectively a 4 phases for a Class C environmental assessment. The first is to define what the problem is. The second is looking at solutions to that problem. And then once you've identified what the preferred solution is, looking at how the design can be incorporated, or how that design can be detailed to make sure that that solution can be implemented accordingly. And then of course phase 4 is the documentation. And all throughout this process there is opportunity and avenue for public consultation and of course council involvement as well. So we'll just go through some of the tasks or phases from an overview perspective. So the problem statement, establishing what it is that we're trying to solve. And then the big contributing thing will be the transportation needs and assessment. And again, that's going to focus more than just the transportation, but also looking at cycling and pedestrian activity. Similarly, if we're going to rebuild roads and reconstruct the infrastructure, what about the underground infrastructure? What is the needs as it relates to that as well, recognizing that this is the opportunity to implement any infrastructure improvements as well. There is a notice of commencement which has been completed and has been distributed and advertised. So that is really our first point of public consultation, to let them know that this study is happening and that they can look forward to opportunities in the future. And then we are here today at the coordinated committee presentation number 1. So I just wanted to draw your attention to a few things. So the problem statement is somewhat generic in the sense that we want to make sure that we're casting a wide enough net such that we can seek input on various factors, and that we can look at various environments without without having tunnel vision. So it's really to make sure that existing traffic and infrastructure needs and deficiencies within that project area can be addressed in an environmentally sound manner, taking into account existing demands, future demands, town standards, active transportation, infrastructure requirements, with the ultimate goal of making sure that we're developing something that is not only successful, but is obviously safe and efficient. And one of the key things here also is for all road users. And when we say road, I'm talking about the entire right-of-way, not just the physical asphalt. So we're in process now of looking at the transportation needs and assessment. So we've got those 3 main corridors: Main Street, Old Moseley, and Beach Drive. And we've compiled traffic data from June of 2017, which was collected as part of your recent Transportation Master Plan update. We've undertaken additional counts in June of 2019. And throughout the various transportation master plans that have been updated, it's always been recognized that June is considered reflective of average conditions through the course of the year. And there's also acknowledgement that summer volumes are going to increase, and summer weekend volumes are going to increase even further. And when we look at the data from the 2017 update, in fact, volumes on those roads effectively doubled. So Moseley Street went from about 6,000 vehicles a day to 12, Beach Drive from about 2,500 to 5,000, and Main Street from 4,000 vehicles a day to 8,000 on a summer weekend. Now, when we look at the transportation analyses and the constraints, we tend to look at the peak hours, recognizing that 4,000 cars a day does not mean 4,000 divided by 24 on an hourly basis. So we want to look at what is the peak hours, and how does that impact what the transportation infrastructure needs. So while summer volumes and summer weekend volumes may be double, it doesn't always mean that the peak hour is going to be double. In fact, what typically happens is on a typical weekday, you'd have your AM and your PM peaks, and on your summers and on your summer weekends, those AM and PMs become extended and they become closer and closer together. And likewise, the lunch hour or the early afternoon, particularly on weekends, becomes more prominent as well. So the basis for our assessment moving forward will be those average conditions, recognizing, again, you don't build the parking lot for Christmas Day at the shopping center, you don't build a church parking lot for Easter Sunday. But we do want to acknowledge and recognize that there is going to be significant increases potentially on the summer weekends. And what is that going to mean with respect to your transportation system and the resulting operations? So that then leads us into, well, what is the transportation system going to look like in the future? So looking at the Downtown Development Master Plan with respect to the growth projections and the development levels, we are able then to translate that into additional traffic volumes or additional travel demands on these road systems. And all those black dots represent what we consider the key intersections within the area, and those are the ones that will be specifically addressed. So utilizing what we know with respect to the future development, we'll prepare forecasts for a number of horizons going well into the future to try to identify what is the ultimate transportation system that's going to be needed within this area. And part of that then is also looking at what is the most appropriate form of intersection control. Both the urban design guidelines and the downtown development master plan identified roundabouts at a number of locations. And I think with the Highway 26 roundabouts, the roundabouts in Collingwood, the roundabouts in the Townsville Mountains, certainly they're becoming more and more popular and more acceptable. And I think the benefits are becoming more readily realized and acknowledged. And certainly within this type of environment, they're going to go a long way to reducing travel speeds, improving safety, and more so increasing the capacity of those transportation corridors, and particularly those intersections of question. I think one of the other benefits of the roundabouts, and particularly in this context, will provide is the opportunity for that gateway feature to indicate to motorists and visitors particularly that you are now entering the downtown core, that this is a special area, and we want to make sure that we draw that to your attention. There's two other elements that we want to speak to with respect to the transportation analysis, and one is the one-way operations and relationships between River Avenue Crescent and Glenwood Drive. And certainly we've looked back through historic photos, and it seems like it's always been that case. It's always been one way for a long, long time. And part of our investigation here is to try to understand why that is, recognizing that we don't have a system of one-way roads throughout the town otherwise. And this is really a unique application of these. Certainly on River Avenue Crescent, we've got bicycle lanes on both sides. But I think that's simply come about from a function of there is space, we can afford to put them in, and recognizing that they've only been popular over the last 10 years or so. So we want to look at that in context of the resulting traffic operations. Should they remain one way? Should they be two lanes? Or two-way traffic? And if they're two-way traffic, are we still able to accommodate bicycle lanes? Do we have sufficient road width? Glenwood Drive, for instance, is only about 5.5 meters wide. So typically on a two-way road, you'd want 6 meters of asphalt. But notwithstanding, 5.5 can certainly achieve that objective, and it would actually do so in a safer environment, in the sense that vehicles would be forced to slow down because there are narrower lanes. So that's one of the other elements we'll look at in trying to establish the needs and assessment. And the last one is Beach Drive itself. So currently Beach Drive being 2 lanes per direction, sorry, 2 lanes total, with on-street parking on the inside of the loop, I would call it, operating in a counterclockwise direction. So again, from a transportation perspective and transportation operations, is that the most appropriate and most effective configuration? Or should it be one way in the other direction, or should it be 2 ways? Again, the downtown master plan and the urban design guidelines illustrate it being 2-way traffic. Some illustrations show on-street parking as well. Are those all elements that need to be considered? And I guess the last element of that is, should it be closed altogether to vehicular traffic and simply made into a pedestrian promenade? And certainly the storms and the situations we've had over the past few weeks with respect to the wind uprush, the wave uprush, the sand, speaks to some of the shortcomings with respect to Beach Drive now, where it's located, how it's configured with respect to elevation in context of the beach. So this affords also that opportunity to make any improvements as appropriate. And as part of this study, we'll be looking at an updated natural hazard study to look at that very nature, as to establishing where are the limits of development along the beach, or where should they be in context of the existing and future water levels and uprush from the waves and effective impacts to those beachfront developments. So once we've established what the needs are from the transportation perspective, supplement that the needs from the infrastructure, then we move into phase 2 of the program, which is really looking at the alternative solutions. And as part of that, we will inventory all of the environments that are affected. So that's your typical natural environment, your physical environment, cultural heritage, which addresses your archaeological, your built heritage, economic environments, and then developing an alternative solutions and evaluating them against those various environments. Coming back to coordinate the committee for that presentation prior to taking that information to the public at Public Information Center 1. And just to give you an idea as to the types of solutions that we're looking at, not wanting to get too far ahead of ourselves, is that we need to break this down into the components that the transportation system will provide. So we need to accommodate automobiles, we need to accommodate parking, bicycles, pedestrians. And what are the various options or the various manners in which those can be addressed? So we can look at different numbers of lane configurations, different configurations for parking, whether it be on-street, off-street, angle parking, parallel parking, different accommodations of cyclists, so perhaps we do nothing. Recognizing that the town has an active transportation plan, but doesn't really identify either Main Street or Old Mosley Street as key integral components of that with respect to bicycle lanes. But I think that obviously recognizing that was in 2007, times have changed. There's a shift in desires and a shift in demands. So how can we accommodate bicycles? How can we accommodate pedestrians? You know, typically we do a 1.5 meter sidewalk. Whereas in a downtown environment, I think a 3 to 5 meter boulevard is certainly more appropriate, more conducive to the success of that downtown. And then at the key intersections, we'll be looking at the solutions for providing appropriate intersection control, opportunities and solutions for ensuring that pedestrians can cross at designated locations. And again, we spoke of the one-way operations of Glenwood Drive and River Avenue Crescent, and then the operations of Beach Drive. So those are all the solutions that we would look at and provide evaluations and recommendations at the next committee meeting and at the first Public Information Center. And then it's really from that where we've identified, say, a preferred solution. So let's say, for example, for Main Street, we would identify that, you know, it really should be a 3-lane configuration with on-street bike lanes and parallel parking on both sides. We should have 5 meter boulevards. So let's just say that's the preferred solution. So then we take it through the next step is to say, well, what are the design concepts for establishing or implementing that solution? How wide do we want the lanes to be? How wide do we want the parking bays to be? How do we want to configure those boulevards with respect to the streetscape? And this is really where we're going to bring in Envision Tatham, the streetscape and landscape designers, to really bring the transportation solutions to life. So that's he's going to make my work look pretty effectively what it is, and create the downtown core similar to products that we've done in Perry, Midland, Penetang, and Collingwood. So it's going through that same alternative evaluation and bringing that back to committee and then going to the public again. And this slide is just intended to show you the range of solutions that would be considered, recognizing that we need to balance vehicular movement, getting vehicles through the transportation system and balancing them with place or access. So I think we're somewhere in the middle where we want to make sure that, yes, we do cater to vehicles, but we don't necessarily want to build a 5-lane freeway. At the same time, we want to make sure that pedestrian demands, so we've got ample opportunities for boulevard, for walking, for trails, for cyclists as well. So going through the process, we will establish kind of what the balance is and what that is going to translate to with respect to the street front. And then phase 4, and this is the final phase of the EA process, is really the documentation. So that's where we're going to compile and document everything in a comprehensive report that walks us through from process to process. We come back, present that final report, final recommendation, final streetscape cross-sections and designs to committee, and then issue that notice of study completion as the final means of public consultation. So there will be a number of deliverables throughout the process that will be presented to the committee, that will be presented to the public. So in phase 1 here, we've got a meeting with town staff. At the end of it, we will have a transportation and infrastructure needs assessment report, and we'll have the presentation to committee. And then in phase 2, again, we'll have a number of meetings with town staff, presentation to committee, public open house, and then a subsequent report. And as we move through phases 3 and 4, it's the same thing. So there's meetings, presentations, and public information with reports to follow. So along that way, we're always going to be seeking public input from committee, input from council, and input from staff to inform us So with respect to the immediate next steps, we've had a meeting last week or the week before with staff, gone through the transportation assessment. We're making some tweaks and changes to ensure that we're capturing what the future might hold. We're in process now of identifying what those different solutions might be, with the objective of coming back to committee in January of 2020 and then having that PIC in 2020 as well in January. I think in context of the holiday season upcoming, we want to push it, make sure that we have a good opportunity for the public to attend and not eat into their holiday seasons as well. So that's really why we're into the January for that. But ultimately wrapping up the study in late May, so that we can get ready for the next season. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Look forward to coming back with updates and look forward to developing something that will build on what we have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? We'll start with Councillor Kenny and work down that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank our presenters today. I'm, again, very happy that we're moving forward. I like the concept of the pedestrian cycling being included and repeated and repeated and repeated, because I think that's important, especially for that corridor. And I say that for two reasons. One, it is an area where we can get our residents and our visitors to understand the importance, and not in the wrong way, but in the right way, because it's easy to do. And then that, I'm hoping, again, as you had mentioned, that the active transportation plan was 2008, 2007. I was sitting on the Health Community Network when they delivered that, and you're absolutely right. But although Main Street wasn't mentioned, again, any street in our town that we can make it more pedestrian cycling friendly, I think we as a council should be looking towards that. Again, not forgetting that we still have to use the automobile, but if we can utilize that in a format that we can get people out and enjoying our town, I think that's what we strive for. And just one other thing, as our chair had mentioned before, public input's vital for anything that we do, and if we can continue on getting that from the public, then I think we'll get a better product. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boulanger.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple things. You had indicated we don't build a church for Easter Sunday, but you know, going forward, I think there's a desire and been lots of discussion that our programming will get better and better on our beachfront. So we're going to create more frequency to those peak time frames. And you know, I think even down the line we're looking at, you know, midweek programming during peak season and those types of things where that's a process. But so one of two things have to happen. We either have to program to the limitations of what we're able to do as far as solutions, or we have to have the solutions accommodate the highest possible peak that we anticipate more frequency on. But my other concern, which you didn't address here, and specifically for Beach Drive, as a council, we've made the decision that we're going to terminate leases on our beachfront at the end of next season. We know we have a significant issue on our beachfront related to water level. We also know that your solutions will not be independent, in that I know there's a new acronym for M&R, but the Ministry of Parks and even the NCVA may be involved in some of those solutions, and historically the timelines and the process to that can be significant. And I haven't seen a Gantt chart at this, but my concern is that I don't believe we're going to have shovels in the ground by the spring of 21. And when we're talking the redevelopment of the beachfront, if we're talking the elevation of Beach Drive, some of that work has to be approved and completed prior to the reconstruction of buildings. So I would like to have an understanding of what is a realistic timeline as to when we believe that we would have solutions that are approved and shovels in the ground.
Do you wanna think? Certainly. We have to, again, we're discussing the presentation here, not the future
No,
redevelopment.
this is for them
But
to
I'll let
have information to come back.
Kevin address it, please.
Yeah, I think certainly even from the standpoint of when the DDMP was established, it was well known that we needed still to advance the Class EA and that it would take over a year to a year and a half to complete. So, you know, we're continuing with that process. The DDMP established conceptual streetscaping alternatives, but it still does not negate the fact that we have to follow the Class EA and the Environmental Assessment Act, right? So this still satisfies that in terms of when we can even advance design. So the process we're following now is the same process we were following 3 years ago in concurrence and following the DDMP. So as Mr. Cullip had indicated, the current deliverable in terms of when we filed the notice of completion for the ESR is presumably May to June, so early summer of 2020. Following that, you know, we'll have a preferred design alternative that will have to be presented to committee and council in terms of whether they're in agreement with that. Following that, we need to establish a budget to advance detailed design. Detailed design could take from a year to, you know, a year and a half. It depends on the priorities and competing priorities and how that is going to be financed. So there still is a program that needs to be established, but from the EA, which has always been, I think, a year plus or minus, to design, which most certainly will be a year, depending on the outcome. Right now we can't design, obviously, because we don't know what the outcome of those preferred alternatives are going to be. And then it's a matter of finding that within the priorities and how it's going to be paid, because some of this is not development charge recoverable, so there will certainly need to be funding, and funding can be, we may have to have some creative funding strategies in terms of to advance this. And again, the outcome of this EA will also define, certainly from Beach Drive standpoint, will it remain in its current location? Does it need to be set back such that we have usable space for off the beachfront when those water levels are high, or you know, to enable protection measures during those wave events? So, you know, I don't have a crystal ball in terms of when it's going to be designed, but in terms of the process we're following is consistent with the process we were following from the outset of the DDMP.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just for clarification though, I'm specifically concerned when we're dealing with other ministries and organizations that have a significant impact on the approval process, and not for that to be answered today, but that the next time we meet, that's taken into consideration, and that we have some kind of idea, because we know historically those are not necessarily fast processes.
Sure. And through the EA process, all of those agencies are engaged throughout, so they are certainly one of the primary points of contact, the Ontario Parks, NVCA, in terms of how that solution will advance. So they're engaged from the outset. They're circulated specifically the notice of study commencement. But you're right, when we get to the detailed design, certainly if the, let's say that, you know, the end result was to advance construction on the beach itself, certainly that's another process in its entirety in terms of following the provincial parks and reserves Class A, which is not obviously where we intend going, but they're engaged throughout the whole process, and yeah, there's a process for them to issue permits and to screen projects that have effects on their land, so it's no different than any.
Let's not go too far into speculation. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy this presentation discussion came forward, because it does bring in the sharp focus, the fact that shovels never were going to go into the ground quickly in this process, even though it seemed to be the public's perception. this work had to be done, it has to be done. It's gonna take its time to identify all the infrastructure needs and the road networks and so forth that we need with it. And also the big question, and Kevin touched on it, cost, town versus developer payment for these expenses to do it. That was never clear either, and it's, you know, that has to be determined. How much is going to be on the public tax base and what the developer is going to pick up, and typically developers pay going forward for development, so that has to be sorted out too. So I appreciate this, and that does you know, bring focus to myself and I think to the public.
Okay, Mayor Beckholsey?
Thank you. Just further to Councillor Watson's comments, I think there was a misunderstanding in the community about how quickly shovels would be in the ground. This is a process that we have to do. The fact that these agencies are part of the process moving forward is helpful once we get to those next stages. But also through the RFP process for development of our beachfront, that will also help us with timing of when shovels will be in the ground. But definitely through that process of the developers coming in, there's going to be an expectation that they will contribute somehow to these solutions that are coming out of this report.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just one last comment. Obviously, through the EA process and the evaluation of alternatives and the preferred alternative, that will also define the road allowance needs. We don't have a consistent 30-meter ideal road allowance to accommodate all of these features. So certainly south of Beck Street, we've got a little more flexibility, but as you move towards the bridge and around the corner, and certainly we own some lands along there where we could accommodate additional right-of-way needs, but there are some properties where we don't currently own along the frontage of Molesley Street or Beach Drive. So there are also road allowance needs, but through this program we're also looking at interim strategies. So we have discussed road diets. Certainly along Main Street there is that opportunity to integrate bike lanes, and we have presented that, and this committee has agreed to advancing those initiatives as well. So we're not only going to be looking at ultimate needs to advance the ultimate solution, but also what interim strategies can we accommodate given the current road network and corridor limitations that we do have right now.
Right, thank you. Again, I'll just, before I pull the vote on this thing, there were a couple little things here, and I know it was just for information purposes, but one of your graphs there showed alternatives, not the one with the streets. Go back if you can. It doesn't matter. But one of them had the alternatives as, you know, do nothing. This guy. So when you, thank you. And I looked at that, and I've looked at that in previous reports over previous terms of council. And I've always had a problem with when you see a chart like that that shows do nothing. Because it's got a negative connotation. It's kind of just sitting there saying, it's here, we're living with it. And do nothing can be a very active choice. Of all the choices you have here, do nothing. So I always like the idea of status quo. It means there's been a conscious decision that whatever it is, in this case it might be a road or a bike path or whatever, but there's a conscious decision that this is an acceptable piece. Whereas do nothing just means we throw our hands up in the air. So from the point of view of presentation, status quo is actually an active decision. And I'm not suggesting it be status quo. I don't really care what is on the graph behind me, but I like doing this like a weatherman. Then the other part, and I know that'll come along, yeah, green screen. The other part that'll come along, and again, Councillor Kinney, the Deputy Mayor, and myself were in Ottawa this year, and we did a bike tour. And one of the pieces that stuck with me was they had a variety of different bike lane configurations, both that were on the road allowance, but there was also a raised one that was, so the sidewalk was there was a physical, not a rumble strip, I don't like those, you know that, Stan, but there was a physical demarcation, and on the outer side there was a curbed bike lane. It was tight, but from the point of view of everyone who was on there, and there were 35 people on there, everyone felt safer, and the people from the Ottawa that were doing the presentation said on a per kilometer basis, I forget what the savings was $50,000 to $75,000 per kilometer. I know that'll come in 2 or maybe 3, but I just wanted it there real early because that was a significantly different feel for a cyclist on there. Anyway, but I know that'll come out. So that was my little comment on that. If there's nothing else, I will thank Michael for this. We've got a resolution moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Wells. Resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee receive the information presented by Mr. Cullip for information. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, then we have, we're going to the consent agenda part. I believe 4.5.1, the Public Works 2019 Beach Drive closure and cleanup cost report has been pulled. That's the only one I'm seeing. If yes,
And the accounts should be pulled just because I've declared a conflict on that.
the accounts, thank you for that. Departmental accounts, so that's pulled as well. So, notwithstanding those two, it's moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Kinney, resolved that Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee hereby receives November 14, 2019 consent agenda items 4.4.1 through 4.7.6, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately, as I just noted. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, item 4.5.1, the Beach Drive closure and cleanup costs. I think Councillor Belanger, you pulled this?
Yes, thank you,
Sure,
Chair. A couple of questions for Kevin is, one obviously is some of the costs involved. I don't want to get ahead if it's the same item, but I'll go to the actual event that happened, and my understanding is that there could have been damage inside the building as well on some retail stores, but I'm not positive. Certainly the water was up pretty high on the building. I've just I didn't hear any mention about whether there's any significant damage to a specific unit that is currently being rented out and what the mitigation might be, because we're now dealing with just 1 year left in the term. So was there any possibility that the cost to get something ready for a single season might not warrant it being done? Or
In terms of the building repairs?
Yeah, well, my understanding is it was water inside some of the actual retail units.
Correct. I know the beachfront manager, and perhaps George can speak to this more so than I can, but I know once access was gained, the area was dried out, and anything that needed to be addressed, from my understanding, was addressed. There may have been some damage, but I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is following entry, some additional measures have been established to better protect the doors with sandbagging and plywood efforts. But from a damage perspective, I'm not involved with that.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that briefly. So under the Dardanella, water did enter those units. Most of the units would have a tile floor, so water just accumulated on the tile floor and was cleaned up afterwards. The end unit heading east, the front door pane of glass broke and water got into that unit, and sand did accumulate, and there were damages to some of the contents of that store. That's in the process of being cleaned up. It may be completed now. The store's heading east along Beach Drive under the former Bananas. There was water that had entered in under the door. Sweeps again, tile floors. It was just mopped up. So from an assessment standpoint, in terms of damage, there was the units I've described that had tile floor. There was minimal damage. We put dehumidifiers in, air exchangers in, dried up those units. The one unit that was adversely impacted was the one where the door pane was was broken. The tenant was advised, they have insurance, we've assisted where we can, and I don't know as of today what the status of that is, other than I know the door's been boarded up and measures have been put in place to minimize that happening if we should have another significant wave and wind event.
Okay, through the chair, thank you. I hadn't heard, but I saw the video and the wave action up against the building. I'd never seen that before, so it's good that it's not too bad. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on this item? Seeing none, I'll read the resolution. It's moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Boulanger. Resolved that the Public Works Section of Coordinating Committee does hereby receive the staff report excuse me, pertaining to the 2019 Beach Drive closures and related cleanup costs associated with high water levels, winds, and resultant sand deposition for information. And further, that the Public Works Section of Coordinated Committee recommends to Council that Beach Drive and portions of Spruce Street, First Street, Second Street, and Third Street remain closed for the duration of the winter season. And further, that Beach Drive and associated side streets remain closed until such time as the Director of Public Works or designate deems appropriate, but no later than May 8th, 2020. And before I call the question, I just will note in that report, it was clearly delineated where the markers will be, so I refer public to look at where the barricades are going to be. All right, so having read that resolution, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I'm going to have to learn how to spell unanimously at some point. The next item that was pulled was 4.6.1, noting that the mayor has pulled away as there's an item there which he has a conflict on, and which was declared earlier in this meeting. So, it's moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Wells. Resolved that October 1st to 31st, 2019, accounts as reviewed by Public Works Section of the Coordinated Committee are hereby confirmed. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously with six votes. Other than that, I believe that wraps up our section of this, does it not? It does. So it's now 10:15. We'll take a hard 10 minutes, please. Be back at 10:25. Sorry, I'm watching the Kaminsky method. It's how they
Development Services section of Coordinated Committee. And before we start, Doug Heron would like to introduce a few new members of staff to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, committee. We have some new faces in the Planning and Economic Development Department, and I thought this would be an ideal opportunity to introduce them to both committee and to the public as well. We have 4 new faces. If you'd like to come and join us for, I'll make this very brief. So Joel Vines here is our brand new zoning administrator. Joel's been with us for about 3 weeks and replaces Tracy, who is now the new navigator in the building department. We also have 3 brand new faces, which are our new staff members, which we very much appreciate because it is certainly helping us in terms of getting things done in the department and in terms of council's goals. This is Julie Nolan. Julie Nolan is our brand new implementation planner. We have Adam Fraser. Adam is our 2-year consultant, helping Nathan update our official plan policies and our comprehensive zoning bylaw. And then we have Tyler King. Tyler King is our new economic development officer. And Tyler has been out meeting with local businesses and working with events on the air show event. So we're very, very pleased with the new faces that we have and the new talent we have in-house. And I am feeling very short these days.
Some of us were commenting that we were feeling a little more mature.
Not short of staff though.
But anyway, I thought it was an opportune moment for you to get to know the faces, because I know as you're in and out, we're all very busy, but of course our doors are always open, and thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. You might not get too many of those, so take it.
Back to work.
Pretty nice has brought the average age down, way down.
Okay, so moving on. We have no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings today for Development Services. There are 4 items remaining in unfinished business. There's no comments. No other agency reports. We have a consent agenda. I'll read the consent agenda item and then list the items that have been pulled. Pulled items are 5.5.1 official plan amendment for home development, and 5.5.8 Bill 108 reducing processing timelines for Planning Act applications. There are no others. It is resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 14th, 2019 consent agenda items 5.4 through to 5.7, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. This is moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Boulanger. Seeing no comments, all in favor? And that passes unanimously. So the first item pulled was 5.5.1 official plan amendment, and this was actually pulled by staff. Mr. Reeve is joining Mr. Heron at the table. Who would like to speak to this?
Good morning, Coordinated Committee, members of the public. Staff requested that the report regarding the applications by Elm be pulled for the purpose of requesting direction from Coordinated Committee for staff to proceed in issuing the notice of public meeting in advance of the minutes from today's meeting being ratified by Council on November 26th. The reason for that is that if staff wait until after the minutes are ratified on November 26th, the public meeting could take place as early as the council meeting in January. Whereas if staff are provided with the opportunity to issue the notice of public meeting between today and the November 26th council meeting, then we would have an opportunity to have that public meeting at the December 17th meeting of council. So it would save approximately 4 to 5 weeks on when we could get the public meeting before council.
Okay. Mayor Bethel.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to staff for doing that. I think it's important that we keep our applications moving forward as quick as possible, and I'm sure that the development community appreciates having that move forward quicker as well. So fully supportive of that.
Councillor Foster?
I'll move that if you want. Move that we do that.
I'll second,
Councillor
but
Blondin?
my, thank you, Chair. My comment was just we're coming up to the Bill 108 item, and in the spirit of moving things forward quickly, I would support this as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson?
I'm good, I think it's been addressed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect. So then, can I read the amended motion from staff, as I haven't read the initial? I just read that, and
Yes.
then if Councillor Foster and Councillor Melanger agree, then it will be moved and seconded. So the recommendation is that the Development Services Section of Coordinated Committee recommends that Council direct the Council hold a public meeting pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act to obtain public and agency comments with respect to the applications for amendment to the town's official plan and zoning bylaw and for draft plan of subdivision approval submitted on behalf of Elm Wasaga Beach 2016 Inc. for lands described as blocks 50, 56, 58 to 60 in Plan 51M-1158 in the town of Wasaga Beach, and that staff be directed to post the notice of public meeting in the newspaper prior to council adoption of minutes of coordinated committee. Are you good with that, Councillor Foster and Councillor? Okay. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. That was with the change on it. Okay, so the next item to be pulled was 5.5.8, Bill 108, reducing processing timelines for Planning Act applications, review of current practices in processing development applications. And this is pulled by Councillor Boulanger and Councillor Watson. Councillor Boulanger, would you like, sorry, would the staff like to speak first, or would you like to hear?
You can give a brief, I can give a very brief synopsis of the rationale and the reason for this. It's a direct result of the province looking to streamline the development approvals process and get more houses in the ground and quicker. The Planning Act has been for the longest time geared to making sure the public gets notice of development applications. And that's very much ensconced into our report as one of the guidelines that we looked to. And then the other guideline is the newer one, where the province is directing that the planning processes be shortened in order to achieve that getting houses in the ground quicker. So that's the other principle that we looked at in terms of bringing recommendations forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Councillor Connolly.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I read that correctly, one of the options was to no longer utilize the newspaper ad. And I'm not sure what's legislated and what's not today, but and I'm all for, I support everything we're trying to do, but it seemed to be lacking. Like, we seem to be moving in a direction, because many municipalities now don't even have a local newspaper. So I thought we maybe should have a little more formal related to where residents can go for information on a regular basis, read the town website, whether it's something specific to social media that, or I just asked Ian Adams on the break whether, like, a fair bit of the content that we receive on a daily basis on Simcoe updates doesn't always get printed. So, but these could still be electronically produced at a much cheaper cost. So I agree with everything you're trying to do. I just thought that maybe we should be a little more forward as a municipality that is coming up with an alternative solution to newspaper.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. The resolution, the Planning Act allows for two different ways to give notice of public meeting. One way is the municipality can post the notice of proposed change in the newspaper, and the other way is the municipality can post a sign on the property and send letters to all property owners within 400 feet of the subject lands. The town has always done more than it's required
and he has done all of those. Part of the rationale is because we have a lot of snowbirds, and from Florida, they can get online, look at the newspaper, and find out what's going on, whereas they may not get their mail, and they're certainly not driving past the property to see the sign. One of the recommendations in our report is that to do a public information campaign to advise the public that there will be no longer notices published in the newspaper, and redirect them to the town website where we will be posting those notices. That way they can still tap in from Florida or wherever they might go to enjoy the winter. So we've always tried to find a balance. If we're taking something away, how can we continue to fulfill that while still trying to save the time frames in how we produce it? There's another add to that. Another recommendation that is in the report is that staff be delegated the authority that when an application is deemed complete, that we immediately take it to a public meeting instead of coming to committee and asking to go to a public meeting and then posting it. There's almost a 2-month savings there. Now the drawback to that is that there's one less public report on the docket, so there's one less chance for the public to be aware of the process. What staff are recommending is that we be directed to investigate having the developers hold a public open house before they ever make an application, and that the open house be geared to the neighborhood where the application is going to occur. And in that way, we are bolstering, making sure that the public is aware of what could be occurring in their neighborhood. So we've always, in the recommendations we've made, we've tried to balance that with a different approach.
Thank you. Supplementary?
I'd say just further to that is, would there then be, if we adopted that, would there be a consistent method and way the developer would have to communicate to the public the open house?
Yes, we would look to devise that method. So in the staff report, we're recommending that we be directed to go out and investigate how that occurred, put together some operational policy, and then report back to committee. Now, eventually, that might have to be built into the new official plan, but it's certainly something that we would like to investigate further. Thank you.
Councillor Watson was next, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to commend planning on this initiative to address the issues regarding Bill 108. It's clear the provincial government wants to reduce red tape and speed up the approval process for development and housing. Other agencies in the approval process, such as conservation, are also trying to respond and streamline their protocols, much as you have indicated on your charts, going from 6.5 months to 3.3 in the process, which is a 50% reduction, which is fantastic. Conservations are also looking at their minor and major applications and trying to shorten these timeframes down to 50 in the 50% to 2/3 range. So it's everyone seems to be working together to a common goal here, which is fantastic. The old saying, time is money, is very relevant, as all costs related to delays in the approval process eventually get passed to the consumer and inflate the cost of housing and affordability, which is contrary to what the province is looking at. So I really thank you for the initiative, and I think that this is going to work really well.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this might be the only part of Bill 108 I haven't objected to. The idea of moving things along quickly is not, I think it's fundamentally correct. I look at it and I go, the notification, to me the notification and transparency piece, public notification continues to be the priority, and so staff have outlined some options. And I think it's absolutely critical, and it went to a comment I made earlier, we have a variety of medium that we use in the town to get information out, and they're not widely utilized, or not, to my view, they're not widely utilized. So the town, using the town website merely allows people who have an interest in it to have a central site where they can go and find the information that is accurate. It's not spun. it's exactly, follows all the guidelines and regulations. So we have to, we, broad, plural, have to make sure that our town website is accessible, easily accessible to anybody, and when you, and I'm not casting dispersions on snowbirds or anybody else, but you go, it should be, click here to get to the website, click here to get what you want. It can't be a situation where you have to dig 5 levels to get to it, and that's regardless of anyone's computer ability or not. People get, they find other sources which aren't accurate. So I commend staff on the recommendation, and I want to make sure, though, from the point of view of this, our coordinated committee, that the message be absolutely as easily accessible and with as much advance notice as we can, noting that time is money. It'll save months and months of time and expense, and allow a decision to be a proposal to come up, be decided upon, and be acted upon in a very timely manner. So I'm supportive of this. Not the rest, but this part.
Wonderful. Mr. Heron.
I would like to take a moment to speak to the recommendations, because the resolution is quite detailed and long. But there's a point that needs to be made that is not readily evident in the report before you. The report is geared to developer-made applications, so targeted to geographic application. There will be occasion where we would still post notices of change or proposed change in the newspaper. That's where, if it's a town-initiated application and all we're doing is changing a policy within the zoning bylaw or the OP, and it doesn't have a geographic tie. A good example is recently we changed the definition of public use. In a situation like that, we would absolutely continue to put a notice in the newspaper to make sure that we comply with the Planning Act. With regard to the resolution, it goes through the 3 points we're recommending for change to comply with Bill 108, and that is staff be delegated authority to just move to a public meeting, to issue notice of a complete application of public meeting at the same time, and also to change how we give notice. And then there's other recommendations for pre-consultation. In doing a review, we realized that this is something we should have done years ago. We actually don't have a bylaw that requires pre-consultation, as most other municipalities do, so we thought we better fix that one. So that's the reason for that resolution in there. There's also a recommendation that going forward, that staff make the presentations at public meetings, and we want to do that for consistency, to make sure that what's presented to the public and to council is accurate and consistent. But there would be opportunity for the developer's planner or representative to also speak once the staff make a presentation. And staff are recommending that we think that there are further efficiencies that are available to us. They're not directly related to Bill 108, and we're asking for direction to look a little deeper. And one of those is how we apply lift hold. Right now it's pretty cut and square in the official plan how it's applied. We would like to look at that. We think that there's room that we can adjust how we apply lift hold, and we might be able to allow for issuance of building permits much sooner than we do right now. So we want to report back again with more efficiency.
Thank you. Councilor Boulanger?
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification on your last comment. If staff is consistently doing the preparation and presentation, would there be a real cost savings to the developer and an opportunity for a revenue for the town? So it's not really costing the developer any more money, but town staff is doing something on that the developer had done previously.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We haven't done a financial analysis to that level, but I have put some thought into it. And the report does state that there would be some cost savings to the town because we're not spending money doing ads in the newspaper. But that cost savings would be taken up with extra staff time preparing for public meetings. So there's a bit of a balance in terms of how the cost per application would occur. I do not have that calculation down to the pennies, but I can say it's probably pretty close.
Okay, seeing no more comments, I will read the lengthy motion. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Wells, resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it A, direct staff to immediately begin implementing the 3 proposed changes identified in the report of the Senior Planner dated November 14th, 2019, intended to reduce the timeframes associated with the processing of applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and for draft plan of subdivision approval, to better reflect the prescribed timeframes under the Planning Act resulting from Bill 108. And B, pass the bylaw attached to the report of the Senior Planner dated November 14, 2019 in its substantive form to make pre-consultations mandatory for applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, site plan approval, or draft plan or subdivision approval. C, direct staff to serve as the primary presenter of development applications and procedural steps at statutory public meetings. And D, direct staff to research and provide a report to the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee with respect to other municipal jurisdictions' practices regarding 1, the use of the holding symbol in official plan policies and zoning bylaw regulations for the purpose of withholding the as-of-right permission of land development where it may serve to duplicate other municipal requirements, for example, site plan control area bylaw. And 2, the use of public open houses as part of the standard public consultation requirements in the processing of site-specific development proposals. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes the agenda for Development Services. We will reconvene at 10:55 with General Government.
ready to go? Okay, I'd like to call coordinated committee back to order for the general government section. And as always, I'm not aware of any conflict of interest or pecuniary interest. Oh, David,
There was
I'm
one.
sorry, yes, David, I didn't hear you state with respect to the medical center report.
Yeah, it was passed forward there.
I
It
just
should be
didn't have it in
somewhere.
front of me, so you'll be stepping back for that particular section. So, Secretary, you can note that Councillor Foster will step back for that. All right, so we begin with the resolution as it relates to the consent agenda. There's nothing prior to that. It's resolved that General Government Section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 14th, 2019 consent agenda items number 6.4 through 6.7, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. And there were two motions pulled, one related to the after-hours clinic, 6.5.2, and the second related to the bylaw officer's report, item number 6.5.5. So the consent agenda is everything except those two particular items. All in favor? Carried without objection. Moving then to the item 6.5.2. This is the CAO's report with respect to the after-hours clinic. And George, perhaps you will introduce our guest. Well, reintroduce our guest. She has been with us several times in the past. And I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if most of the committee members are familiar with Sandy Thurston, she's our consultant who has been working with the town on overseeing the operation of the after-hours clinic. She's responsible, along with her colleague Paula, for the overall management of the after-hours clinic, and they generate the statistics report that's in your package. So we're here this morning to talk about the after-hours clinic, and as committee is aware, the after-hours clinic pilot, which commenced last November 2018, ends at the end of this November. And the recommendation in the report is that it be extended 1 month to the end of December to allow the various parties that are involved in the operation of the after-hours clinic to see what options might prevail going forward to see the clinic continue or discontinue commencing in the new year. In the report are outlined 5 options. The one that's being recommended today is just to extend it the 1 month. The partners involved are the South Georgian Bay Community Health Center, the Georgian Bay Family Health Team, which is comprised of the doctors that staff the clinic, the hospital, which looks after the paying of the the doctor's remuneration, and the town of Wasaga Beach. So all of these partners have been in conversation over the last month or so with respect to what options exist to pursue the continuation of the clinic. And as the statistics indicate, the clinic has been successful. Certainly from patient volumes, uptake on the clinic, as the statistics have continuously demonstrated, there has been interest in maintaining the clinic. The challenge is, from a monetary standpoint, that the expenses of the clinic aren't covered entirely by the billings that are generated. So from a budget standpoint or a business standpoint, unless the town continues to fund or the expenses are reduced, then the clinic is not financially sustainable. The doctors bill directly to OHIP, and so they're remunerated through that. As committee is aware, the town pays $150 standby fee to the physicians to ensure that they're compensated adequately for their services. And in addition, about half the clinics are staffed by nurse practitioners, and they are not able to bill OHIP, so they're paid an hourly rate, and they also get the $150 remuneration. So when you add the staffing costs, the other costs associated with the clinic, the billings don't quite cover it. So we need some time to continue that dialogue with the partners in the operation of the clinic. In the report, you see that the CHC has already met as their board, and they've outlined what they're prepared to do in terms of reducing their costs or holding their costs for the next month and then into the first 3 months of 2020. The excuse me, the family health team, the doctors, are meeting at the end of November to talk about their continued involvement with the clinic. We've had conversations already with the with the Collingwood General Marine Hospital. They're prepared to continue in terms of their relationship with the after hours clinic. So if these discussions continue, we hope by mid-December that we'll be in a position to be able to come back to committee with recommendation going forward for 2020. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, and she can add if there's anything that I've missed.
No, I don't think there is anything. I think we really just need time at this point for the key partners to sit and really work through the nuts and bolts of what the various options require and whether or not we can reach that agreement and minimize the costs of the clinic going forward as much as we possibly can, and see how we could share in a partnered solution going forward. And it just needs the time to work it out at that level of discussion.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, just to conclude, I think from the conversations that we've had, all the partners are interested in trying to find a solution. They're not sure if a solution is there, but they're interested in continuing to work at trying to find a solution, and that includes the doctors who have been impressed with the statistics. I think the pilot achieved what it was intended to achieve, which was to demonstrate that there is a demand for after-hours healthcare in Wasaga Beach. It's just now how to make it work.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put the motion onto the floor, and then I'll take comments or questions thereafter. So it has been moved by Councillor Belanger and seconded by Councillor Kinney that General Government Section Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it extend the operation of the After Hours Medical Clinic 1 month to December 30th, 2019 based on the current delivery model. Further, that staff be directed during this period to explore all options in a collaborative manner with the partners involved in the operation of the After Hours Clinic to keep the clinic open beyond the end of the year. And further, that the staff report back to committee on December 12th on the results of those discussions. Okay, comments or questions? Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Chair. I pulled this item, and I'm certainly supportive of the option, but I want to make it very clear that I am not supportive of an option that ends the clinic. To me, this is an essential service for our community. Doctor recruitment program does not replace what a walk-in clinic is meant to do. I think we have to find a solution. Through the process, I had some concern of how receptive the doctors had been through the process, and I think everyone's aware we, as a community, spent a great deal of money to help them establish their businesses in Wasaga Beach, and this is a service our residents require. And it's no different than public transit. If we were subsidizing public transit by $100,000 a year, we wouldn't cancel it. It's an essential service. What I would ask is that either staff or members of the clinic maybe do a projection for the full year of 2020, because my understanding is there were some one-time startup costs that were in the amounts, and every time we extended the hours of the clinic, there was always a little bit of a lapse. It took 2 or 3 weeks before the public became aware. But once they became aware, my understanding is the clinic was very busy and ran over capacity most of the time. And the final thing I would ask is, I don't believe we're doing a good enough job at capturing how many people actually showed up. They were putting a closed sign, I've said this a number of times, outside the door, and I have been told by people that were on site that there were hundreds of people over the life of the clinic that saw the sign and just left. And so I don't know what public if the public knew that the life of the clinic being ongoing was a requirement for them to make sure that they go in, or there's a drop box or something to say, I was here and I couldn't be serviced, I think they would participate. And so,
Just to respond to your last question, the staff have been very careful over the last 3 or 4 months to ensure that they're capturing the people who are there. So we may miss people in the parking lot if somebody is coming out of the clinic and tells them, but for the most part, people are very good at checking in and making sure that we're capturing those numbers. So that's why in the stats you see that our first half of the year we weren't consistent enough, but the last part of the year people really were helping us to gather that, and it's showing that more and more the clinics are having to close at capacity. So some of those conversations about, do we extend the hours, do we shorten the number of clinics but make them longer, there are all kinds of scenarios that we can work through that will help us build that better projection for 2020 as we work with the partners to do that. But we need them and their costs and to be part of that projection too.
yeah, thank you, and we also need to have a clinic.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'm extremely happy to hear that the stakeholders are talking. I mean, dialogue's important, and for council to give our key people, you guys, time to negotiate, figure it out, make it work. We've got to do that, most definitely, even if it has to be more than a month. Because as my peer, Councillor Boulanger, did say, it's a value to the community. We see it every month within the data, and we hear it in the community. So again, I would not be in favor of closing it. Thank you.
George?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hot off the press, our Health Minister, Christine Elliott, made an announcement yesterday. It made today's paper, and it's basically, I'll read a couple of the highlights from it. More Ontarians will be able to have video visits with doctors over the next year as the provincial government takes the first steps to offering more digital healthcare as part of the strategy to end hallway healthcare. Changes to modernize communications between patients and healthcare will include secure messaging, online booking of appointments, better access for Ontarians to their own healthcare records, and allowing care providers to look at patients' full online records under new privacy rules. Patients should talk to their doctors to see if visits can be done from the comfort of their living rooms, over their computers or smartphones. Credit Valley Hospital in Mississauga is already doing this. If it's something really difficult and complicated, they'll need to have an in-person visit, but for many people who just want a quick consult with their doctor, the virtual care visits are going to save them a lot of time. The province will spend $3 million this year to compensate physicians for video visits. Credit Valley are already using video links to consult with patients and colleagues at other sites in the Trillium Health Partners Network and hospitals through proposed amendments to the Personal Health Information Protection Act. Health teams are being informed to oversee care for patients will be able to collect, use, and share information from individual patients so they don't have to tell their medical stories over and over again. This will help various providers involved with integrated care. You get the point what's happening. We already have a new business in town, PharmaSave, that's offering that service, and healthcare is in a transition. They're moving forward quickly. They're consolidating. I think they're eliminating the LHINs, is my understanding, and consolidating. It's going to be called Health Ontario. So I'm in support of the 1-month extension, but things are moving quickly, and there's going to be a lot of new models out there that could hopefully save us $40 million a year.
Nina?
Thank you. Just a comment, I think it's important that we don't sit here today and make a decision whether we support closing or not closing or what. I think we need the information from these meetings that you're going to be having. You know, to compare it to transit, I see it a little bit different. A walk-in clinic and health and things is a provincial responsibility. So You know, the doctors, and it's no slight against the doctors, but they fund the Collingwood Clinic. It's a business case for them. So I think before we sit and say no matter what, we're going to support a failing business case, I think we need to have all the information. And I think if the doctors were to choose to not carry on with it for whatever reason, I hope that they would be on board with helping us as a municipality to go to the ministry and fight for us at that level to get something here funded by the appropriate level of government. Thank you.
Just my own comments. First, I want to take slight exception to the suggestion that we funded doctors to come to town and now they're not participating. Because yes, we did fund some of the doctors to come to town, but if you look at their schedules and you look at how many of them are putting in numerous shifts at the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital in the emergency ward, putting in emergency shifts in other neighboring hospitals where their emergency departments can't function without their services. Look at the number of hours they're operating their own clinics. I'll just repeat, I take exception to the statement that they are not pulling their own weight. Yes, they may not have participated in this particular clinic, but for them to have done that would have mean that they would have had to withdraw services from some of their other commitments to other clinics and or to the hospital. So I'll leave it at that. I will support the motion definitely today to extend for 1 month, to give you some time to work through the situation. I will say that barring some unforeseen circumstances arising over the next month, right now, as George has indicated, healthcare in Ontario is, I'm not sure whether we call it in transition or whether we call it in complete reconstruction. But certainly there's a lot of things happening, and I don't know that within a month we are actually going to know where the pieces are going to fall together or fall out, and what, perhaps even who you should be negotiating with during that period of the month. So I'll simply say now that yes, I'll support this motion till the end, to continue to the end of the month. At the end of the month, unless there is a resolution to the issue that allows us to find a way to keep the clinic open, or we are on some kind of an unexpected trend, it will be my intent at that point to move that we in fact keep the clinic open for 1 more year. This is my belief only, that we keep the clinic open for at least 1 more year to allow more time to negotiate with doctors and the Ministry of Health and the new methods of delivery. But that should I make that motion, or should I have to make that motion or suggestion, I would be making it very clear that it is a 1 year only. And at the end of that year, the Ministry of Health has either picked up the reins, and our residents know that it was not because this council didn't do everything possible to make it happen, but that the responsibility is, should it ever result in having to go the undesirable route, that it's very clear to our residents and to the public and surrounding communities that that wasn't the problem created by this council, but rather it was a problem and it was the result of the Ministry of Health not being prepared to pick up their responsibility. So again, I support the motion, but we'll see where it goes in a month. I wish you good luck, because I want to see it continue. Having said that, I'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion as it was read? So it's approved 6-0 with no objections. Councillor Foster. The second item that was pulled is item 6.5.5, the Municipal Law Enforcement and Property Standards Report dated November 14th. And this was pulled by, oh no, this is because we have to make a decision on option 1 or option 2. So I will read the motion, and we do have a proposal from moved and seconded, so I'll read the motion as it's given to us. resolved that the General Government section of Coordinated Committee recommends, this is moved by Councillor Watson and seconded by Deputy Mayor Bray. Resolved that the General Government section of Coordinated Committee recommends to Council that it receive the November 14th, 2019 Backyard Chickens Report for information. And further, the General Government section of Coordinated Committee provides staff direction on one of the following options regarding the allowance of backyard chickens. And it has been proposed and moved and seconded that we go to option 2, direct staff to prepare a public consultation process in order to determine appropriate requirements for a limited or pilot backyard chicken policy within the town of Wasaga Beach, noting that this option would require the planning department to add this into their work plan and subsequent amendments to the town's planning policies. Backyard chicken report. Comments, questions? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of struggled with this a bit. However, the report that I read was very complete. Thank you, Jeff. And I honestly thinking we should do due diligence to find out whether or not this type of raising of animals works within the town. Because many of our neighbors are looking at it, some don't, some do. So I think at least we should look at seeing where, or get more information on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, George, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am in support of option 2, doing a pilot project. My introduction to this recently has been in the city of Vancouver, and I had no idea. We visit there every year because we have children and grandchildren out there, and as we walk the streets, and we're in a residential area, the lots are actually somewhat smaller than probably our typical subdivision here, and as I walk around, I see the chickens in little chicken coops as I go. I hear them, and it's quite popular, and it sort of bowled me over the first time that I think here's a major city, over 1 million people, and they have chickens. But it seems to work for them, and we all know BC's a little greener and a little, a little further out there sometimes with their ideas, but it certainly works in that environment, and I'm willing to take a look at it here and see if it could.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I've certainly heard from a couple of residents that were interested, so I'm happy to see it moving forward. Pilot project sounds great. Looking at what other communities do, I think the town still maintains or can maintain some control with licensing, so that if smell becomes an issue, or if you just get that poor chicken owner like you do with a poor dog owner, there is still something that we can do. So I'm excited to see it moving forward.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, when we talk about food security and sustainable food sources, this gives an option for people to do. I'm in favor of the general support of it. We've had this discussion years ago, I believe, and I spent a lot of time looking at the animal control bylaw, and there's a list, and it does include chickens and goats and things like that. It also includes the manatee. And a variety like ocelots. It's fascinating, but I think in this case, if we're dealing, because I'm concerned about manatees in backyards, but the reality though is that the chicken, and it's very clear in every bylaw, including four towns or four wards in Toronto, that you can have it. Roosters are not part of this whole thing. They're the noisy ones, and much like around the council table sometimes. But I do think that this is something that we're in a community that we need to be embrace the idea of possibility of food security, bearing in mind that there can be an impact on a neighbor, and that can be controlled through licensing and bylaw, much like when you talk about the growing of marijuana has things like that. So I think we have to remain open to progress and look and do it as a pilot and see where it goes from there. So I'm in support of the option 2 as presented.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor? It is accepted without objection.
I was gonna get into that. It's too.
We're now going to be moving, thanks Jeff.
Thanks.
We're now gonna be moving into closed session, so, read the motion. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Bray and seconded by, Councillor Belanger. Resolved that pursuant to section 239, sub 2, sub B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the November 14th, 2019 Coordinated Committee meeting will move into closed session to discuss matters regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. All in favor? Again, it's approved without objection. And I simply wait to asking the, goodbye Morley. back on live?
Back.
Okay, we've returned to public session, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Belanger. The committee confirms the direction given to the Senior Special Events Coordinator regarding an identifiable individual. All in favor? The motion is carried without objection. Unless somebody tells me that I missed something, we are adjourned. Oh, sorry, George, I apologize. I did miss somebody.
Oh, no, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to mention to members of committee that, just to advise that the town has submitted its application to the infrastructure program. It was submitted last Friday. Deadline, I believe, was today, but the town got its application in for the twin pad multi-purpose facility last Friday. So it's in there, and I just wanted to commend staff on all the hard work in terms of preparing the application. It was a lot of work. It was certainly a team effort by a number of people, and we look forward to a positive result.
Well done.
We don't have a reply yet.
We've had almost a week.
Where's that Bill 108 now?
Well done. All right.
Okay.
We're done. We're adjourned.
Well done to you, Jen.